Matador horrifically gored through leg and flinch by charging bull during terrifying Spanish bullfight. A shocking bullfight incident in Spain left spectators horrified after renowned matador Paco Ureña was brutally gored and tossed through the air by a raging bull during a live performance at Madrid's famous Las Ventas arena. Now let's dig deeper into the story and uncover what really happened on our AI podcast.
Imagine you are sitting in the stands of Madrid's famous Las Ventas arena. The afternoon sun is just beating down, baking the sand of the ring.
Yeah, and you're surrounded by nearly 24,000 other spectators. But despite that massive crowd, there is this heavy, breathless silence hanging in the air.
Right. Down in the center of that vast, dusty circle, there's literally just a man, a piece of fabric, and a massive charging beast. I mean, you can practically hear the thud of the hooves against the dirt.
Oh, absolutely. The tension is so thick, it feels like a physical weight on your chest.
It really does. It's a scene that feels completely disconnected from our modern, safety-obsessed world, Yet it's happening live, right in front of you.
It really is the ultimate distillation of high-stakes tension. You have a solitary human figure actively choosing to stand in the path of over 1,000 pounds of pure, unadulterated muscle and instinct.
And for the people in those stands, that tension is the entire point, isn't it?
Exactly. They are watching a live tightrope walk. And the penalty for a single miscalculation isn't a bruised ego. It is immediate, catastrophic physical trauma.
Which brings us to today. Today, we're immersing ourselves in the brutal realities of that arena. We're doing a deep dive into a single, incredibly intense source that puts us right down on that sand.
Yeah, we're looking at excerpts from Blood and Sand, The Perils of Las Ventas.
Right. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore the incredibly fragile, razor-thin line between choreographed art and raw chaos in the ring.
Because that line can vanish in a millisecond.
It really can. And we want to examine the stark physical and biological realities of this practice. Realities that are fueling a massive, highly polarized modern debate around a tradition that has survived for centuries.
Yeah, because when you look at the actual physics and biology of what happens when things go wrong,
you're forced to ask why human beings willingly subject themselves to this level of danger. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really grasp that line between art and chaos, we have to look at the mechanics of the performance itself. The source provides a chilling case study with veteran matador Paco Ureña.
Right, Paco Ureña.
Yeah. And when you watch the initial phase of his time in the ring, it doesn't look like a desperate fight for survival.
Not at all. It looks like he's in absolute control. I mean, he's maneuvering around this massive animal using the traditional cape, seemingly guiding this charging beast right past his body with inches to spare.
Just inches, yeah.
He dodges the horns with this incredibly precise footwork. It honestly reminds me of a high-wire act without a net.
That's a really good analogy.
Because when a skilled acrobat is up there, it looks like a beautiful controlled dance.
Yeah.
You watch and think the physics are working perfectly in their favor right up until the exact millisecond the physics turn against them.
Exactly.
But how is he even doing that? How does a man control an animal that size with a piece of cloth?
It actually comes down to exploiting the animal's biology. There's a common misconception that bulls are enraged by the color red.
Right, the classic cartoon trope.
Right, but in reality, bulls are dichromatic. They are essentially colorblind to red.
Wait, really? Colorblind to red?
Yeah, what they're actually reacting to is motion. So the matador's entire craft relies on visual manipulation.
Okay, so the color of the cape is just for the audience, basically.
Pretty much. By snapping and sweeping the cape, the matador creates a larger, moving false target. The bull's visual processing locks onto the fastest moving object.
Ah, I see.
So Ureña, with his years of veteran experience, is essentially hacking the bull's predatory tracking system. He's making it predictable.
But the terrifying thing about hacking a biological system is that an animal isn't a computer program.
No, it is not.
It doesn't always follow the endpoint. And we see the exact moment that predictability shatters in the source material.
Yeah, the lunge.
Exactly. The bull suddenly stops tracking the cape. It lunges forward, completely ignoring the fabric, and one of its horns hooks right onto Ureña's right arm.
And the sheer physics of this moment are just mind-boggling.
It's terrifying. It doesn't just bump him. It violently lifts a grown man entirely off the ground, launching him into the air.
Yeah, right into the...
He crashes down onto his knees, and 24,000 people collectively gasp. You can feel the horror of the crowd realizing this script has just been incinerated.
What's fascinating here is the biomechanics of that lift. We tend to underestimate the sheer kinetic energy involved in a moment like that.
I mean, how much energy are we talking about?
Well, you have a beast weighing over half a ton moving at upwards of 25 miles per hour.
Half a ton at 25 miles an hour. Wow.
Right. But the real weapon is the bull's neck. Bulls possess this massive mound of muscle right behind their head called the marilo.
The Murillo. Okay.
Yeah, and evolution designed that specific muscle for upward tossing and territorial combat.
Oh, man. So it's literally built to throw things.
Exactly. When that horn catches Ureña's arm, he isn't just being pushed. He is being leveraged by a biological hydraulic press.
A biological hydraulic press. That's a terrifying way to put it.
It is, but it's accurate. The illusion of safety, built upon all those years of veteran experience in visual tricks, is completely undone in a single, unpredictable moment of pure animal instinct.
And the danger escalates instantly from there. I mean, being thrown is bad enough, but when he crashes to his knees, he loses his only real defense.
His mobility.
Right, his mobility. Ureña's on the sand, desperately trying to stand back up, but the bull is already pivoting and charges again.
And this is where it gets really bad.
It does. This time, the horn catches his left leg. And the power of that Murillo muscle you just mentioned is put on full display. The bull lifts Ureña high into the air and carries him, suspended on the horn for several terrifying seconds.
Yeah.
Just think about that if you're listening to this. Seconds. When you are impaled and dangling from the head of a raging animal, 3 or 4 seconds must feel like an absolute eternity.
Oh, without a doubt.
He is just carried around like a rag doll before finally being flung back to the dirt.
Because a human body offers essentially zero resistance to an animal bred for that specific type of combat.
Right, we're just not built for it.
Not at all. When the bull flings Ureña back onto the sand, the solo performance is over. The choreography has completely collapsed into chaos.
Which fundamentally changes the entire dynamic of the arena. Once the Matador is down and vulnerable, survival depends entirely on his team.
It shifts in a split second.
Yeah, from a lone individual staring down nature to a desperate group rescue mission.
And this is where the quadrillas, the support team, have to instantly deploy. When the illusion of the solo master falls apart, the safety net has to act before the animal can trample the downed man.
And the intervention is frantic. The quadrillas rush into the arena, but they don't attack the bull, do they?
No. They frantically wave their capes from multiple directions, basically blocking its vision.
It's pure sensory overload, right, to distract it just long enough to pull Ureña away.
Exactly.
But let me push back on this whole dynamic for a second. If a veteran Matador at the top of his game ultimately needs a team of guys waving capes to bail him out of a fatal situation, does that expose a flaw in the idea of mastery?
That's a really good point.
Like, is the mastery just a temporary illusion that everyone agrees to believe in until the animal decides it's had enough?
You're hitting on the exact paradox that makes the event so captivating to its audience. The mastery is highly conditional.
Conditional, right.
It is a fragile agreement between human intellect and wild instinct. The very presence of the quadrillas in the ring is the unspoken admission that absolute control is impossible.
They're the living proof that the danger is real.
Exactly. They are there because everyone knows the wild nature of the beast can never be fully extinguished.
Right.
And when we look at how they rescue him, it again comes back to biology. By waving multiple capes simultaneously in the bull's peripheral vision, they are breaking its target lock.
How does that work exactly?
Well, a bull has wide peripheral vision, but poor binocular depth perception right in front of its nose.
Oh, I see.
So the chaotic movement scrambles its visual processing, forcing it to drop its focus on the man on the ground.
And thank goodness it does, because the physical reality of what happens when that focus isn't broken is gruesome.
It really is.
Ureña manages to hobble away from the arena, but blood is pouring from a massive wound in his leg. Medical reports confirmed he suffered a 30-centimeter goring injury.
30 centimeters?
That is nearly a foot long. When I read that, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. A 30-centimeter puncture wound in a human leg.
To understand the severity of a 30-centimeter goring, you have to realize a bull's horn isn't a scalpel.
Right. It's not a clean cut.
Not at all. It is a blunt, curved instrument covered in dirt and bacteria. When it enters human tissue with that much force, it causes blunt force tearing and cavitation.
Cavitation.
Yeah, essentially creating massive destructive pockets inside the muscle. It shreds the fascia, destroys the vascular networks, and creates an immediate catastrophic hemorrhage risk.
Wow.
It transforms a cultural performance into a desperate trauma surgery in the blink of an eye.
And what makes this deep dive so sobering is that Ureña's terrifying ordeal isn't a freak one-in-a-million anomaly, is it?
No. Sadly, it's not.
It is a systemic risk inherent to stepping on the sand. The text points to another horrific event from just last month that proves this point.
Precisely. If we leave Madrid and look at Valdemoro, just south of the city, we see the ordeal of Alberto Duran.
Alberto Duran.
Yeah. This expands our understanding of the danger beyond just the initial impact.
Right. Duran is a 36-year-old Matador, and he was competing in the final qualifying round of the Copa Chanel tournament.
So the stakes are incredibly high for him.
Exactly. He's fighting for his career, fighting to advance. And the attack he suffers is incredibly visceral. The bull suddenly thrusts its horns upward, directly into his groin.
It's just horrific.
And just like Ureña, Duran is launched completely into the air before a stunned audience. The text mentions the spectators actually recoiled in horror as he managed to stagger away.
I mean, you can't blame them.
No. Imagine being in the front row, cheering for a display of bravery, and suddenly being confronted with severe, real-time bodily mutilation.
It is a profound shock to the human nervous system to witness that level of violence unexpectedly. But what happens to Duran after he leaves the sand reveals a completely different, almost invisible dimension of the danger.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, in a grim medical reality sense. The battle doesn't stop when you escape the horns.
No, it's really just beginning.
The physical trauma sets off a terrifying cascade of medical failures. Duran is rushed to the hospital and immediately put into emergency surgery for severe damage to his testicles.
Right.
And the doctors managed to complete that first operation successfully. You'd think, okay, he survived, the crisis is over. But it isn't.
It's far from over.
Shortly after, doctors discover a dangerous blood clot forming in one of his legs, forcing him back under the knife for a second. Highly urgent procedure to save the limb and potentially his life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it illustrates how the violence of the arena follows the matador out the doors.
Yeah, the danger doesn't stay on the sand.
Exactly. The human body is remarkably resilient, but an impact like that fundamentally disrupts the body's internal architecture.
How so? Like, what causes the blood clot?
Well, when a person suffers massive blunt force trauma and severe tissue damage, the body's coagulation cascade, its emergency response system to stop bleeding, goes into absolute overdrive.
So the body is trying to save itself, but it ends up overreacting.
Exactly. The trauma triggers a massive inflammatory response. The body floods the system with platelets and clotting factors, rushing them to the groin to seal those catastrophic wounds.
Okay, that makes sense.
But that systemic shock can cause a state of hypercoagulability. Essentially, the blood starts clotting too easily everywhere, not just at the wound site.
Oh, wow.
It's like a city's emergency dispatch sending every single ambulance, fire truck, and police car to one accident, creating a massive traffic jam that paralyzes the entire city grid.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
And in Duran's case, that traffic jam was a dangerous clot in his leg.
That is terrifying. Think about that for a second. You survive the massive charging beast, you survive the tearing of flesh and the initial emergency surgery, but the trauma echoes so violently through your vascular system that your own blood could still kill you days later in a sterile hospital bed.
It's a sobering thought.
It really highlights just how completely outmatched the human body is in this scenario.
The human body simply did not evolve to absorb the explosive kinetic energy of a charging bull. When that energy connects, our biology fails. And the aftermath isn't just physical, it reverberates culturally too.
Right. So what does this all mean? We've explored the visceral, dusty reality of Las Ventas. We've traced the horrifying physical mechanics of what happened to Paco Ureña and Alberto Duran, from the biology of the bull's vision to the devastating kinetic energy of the impact, to the cascading medical emergencies of blood clots in the hospital.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. We've seen how quickly the illusion of mastery shatters. But these injuries don't happen in a vacuum. They happen in front of massive crowds, and they're acting as flashpoints for a deeply divided societal reaction in Spain.
These brutal incidents are essentially pouring gasoline on an already fierce debate. And it is a debate that cuts right to the core of national identity, ethics, and modern values.
And as we unpack this cultural collision, we need to look at the landscape of this debate completely objectively. The divide is incredibly stark.
It really is two completely different worldviews.
On one side, you have a practice that is a centuries-old tradition. deeply embedded in the historical DNA of parts of Spain. For the advocates and the fans in those stands, this isn't just a sport.
No, not at all.
It isn't a passing piece of entertainment. It is a profound piece of cultural heritage.
To understand the tradition's deep roots, you have to look at what the Matador represents to that audience.
Right. It's more than just a guy fighting an animal.
Exactly. The performance is deeply symbolic. It is seen as a tragic, beautiful, artistic expression portraying the triumph of human intellect, grace, and courage over the chaotic, brute forces of nature and death.
Wow.
And beyond the symbolism, it's tied to agricultural economies, the breeding of these specific lineages of bulls, and generations of historical momentum.
Right. It's a ritual. But on the other side of the aisle, you have a massive, growing wave of vocal criticism from animal rights organizations, safety campaigners, and a large portion of the modern public.
And their voices are getting louder.
They really are. Their argument is grounded firmly in the very realities we spent this deep dive exploring. They point to the horrific, life-altering injuries sustained by humans like Ureña and Duran.
And they point to the undeniable suffering of the animals involved.
Yes. The core of their argument is that no amount of historical momentum or artistic symbolism can justify the extreme physical toll and the ethical compromise in a modern 21st century society.
It is a true collision of values. You have the weight of centuries of history pushing against the evolving ethical standards of the present day.
It's an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object.
Exactly. The critics argue that culture isn't static. It must evolve as our understanding of animal welfare and human safety evolves.
This raises an important question. How does a society navigate this? How do you reconcile a historical practice that is undeniably woven into the cultural fabric with contemporary sensibilities regarding extreme life-threatening peril?
It's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not. When you look at the 30-centimeter cavity in Ureña's leg or the emergency vascular surgeries Duran faced, you aren't just looking at medical anomalies. You are looking at the literal physical manifestation of that cultural clash.
The debate is entirely removed from abstract philosophy at that point. It is measured in lost blood, in torn fascia, in the operating room, and in the ongoing trauma of everyone involved.
Yeah.
And the tension shows no signs of resolving easily because both sides are arguing from a place of deeply held moral or cultural conviction.
It takes the argument completely out of the textbooks and puts it right onto the emergency room table. And that really brings us full circle on our journey today.
It does.
We started by dropping you into that heavy, breathless silence of Las Ventas, looking at the solitary man trying to hack the biology of a massive beast.
The illusion of the high wire act.
Right. We explored the illusion of control through Paco Ureña's terrifying loss of it, and the frantic, sensory overload lifeline of the quadrillas trying to pull him back from the brink.
We examine the pattern of peril and the grim biological cascade of blood clots following Alberto Duran's horrific injury.
And finally, we looked at how those visceral, undeniable realities are fueling one of the most complex cultural battlegrounds in modern Europe.
We have essentially tracked the entire life cycle of a single violent impact. We followed it from the moment the bull's visual tracking breaks, to the devastating kinetic energy of the horn-tearing human tissue, to the hypercoagulation on the operating table, and finally into the center of a national debate on the ethics of tradition.
And through all of those layers, the physics, the biology, the culture, the one absolute constant is the sheer fragility of the human body.
Absolutely.
No matter how many centuries of tradition are holding you up, no matter how perfectly you understand the visual processing of the animal, when you are physically pitted against thousands of pounds of sheer unscripted force, the human body is fragile. The physics always win eventually.
And yet, despite knowing the physics, despite understanding the medical cascade of trauma, the Matadors still step onto the sand, and tens of thousands of people still buy tickets to fill those arenas.
Which leaves us with something profound to think about long after we wrap up today. Think back to that opening moment we described, the intense heat, the swirling dust, the breathless silence of 24,000 people waiting for the charge. If the allure of a tradition relies entirely on the genuine, unscripted threat of life and death consequences. Wait, let me rephrase that. If the allure of a tradition relies entirely on the genuine, unscripted threat of life and death consequences, if the art only truly matters because the danger to the human body is absolutely real, what does it say about the human condition that we still gather in our thousands to watch the very real possibility of tragedy unfold live?
Okay, one question for you. Do you think traditional bullfighting events in Spain should continue despite the serious risk for matadors and the growing criticism from animal rights activists around the world? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.